The stars above the city of Solara glimmered like 1,000 tiny diamonds scattered across a dark velvet sky. The city floated in orbit around a bright blue planet, its towers of glass and steel reflecting the soft glow of distant suns. Among these towers, the royal palace stood tallest, a gleaming spire that seemed to touch the heavens. Inside, the kingdom was alive with preparations for a celebration, but in the midst of it all, a quiet crisis was unfolding. Kael, a young engineer known for his clever mind and humble heart, ran through the palace corridors. His boots clicked against the polished metal floors as he carried a small glowing vial. The liquid inside shimmered with a faint red light, his own blood carefully prepared to save a life that no one else could. The Princess Leora lay in the palace infirmary, pale and weak. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Her usual bright eyes were dull, and even her laughter, which could light up a room, was gone. The royal physicians had tried every known cure, every medicine from across the galaxy, but the alien virus that had infected her seemed unstoppable. Kael paused outside the infirmary door, taking a deep breath. He had no formal training with the royal family, only years of tinkering in his small workshop, experimenting with bioenergy and rare medical technology. But the solution he had discovered required him to act personally, to put his own life at risk. Using his blood in such a way was dangerous. He could become permanently weak or worse. Yet Kael did not hesitate. He opened the door and stepped inside. Leora's eyes fluttered open as she sensed his presence. She tried to speak, but only a faint whisper came out. "Kael," she said, her voice weak but filled with hope. He smiled gently. "I'm here, Princess. I'll help you." The physicians watched in silence, unsure whether Kael's methods were safe. He moved quickly, inserting a tiny glowing injector into a vein in Leora's arm. The liquid, infused with Kael's own bioenergy, flowed into her bloodstream. Kael held his hand steady, focusing all his attention on the delicate process. Minutes passed like hours. Kael felt a burning sensation in his veins, his strength slowly leaving him, but he ignored it. Every heartbeat, every drop of energy went into keeping Leora alive. Suddenly, Leora's eyes widened. Her breathing steadied, her color returned, and a faint glow of life filled her cheeks. She looked at Kael with awe, her lips forming a small, grateful smile. You saved me," she whispered. Kael nodded, his own energy nearly spent. "Yes, Princess. You're safe now." Then his knees gave way and he collapsed onto the floor. The physicians rushed to support him, but he waved them back. His body was weak, but his heart was full. He had done what he had to do. For a long moment, the room was silent except for Leora's steady breathing. Then the Queen Seraphine entered. She had been called immediately when Kael began his procedure. Her eyes widened at the sight, the princess awake and healthy, and the young engineer lying on the floor, pale and trembling. "Kael," the Queen said, her voice a mixture of shock and suspicion. "What have you done?" Kael lifted his head weakly. I saved her, Your Majesty, my blood. It was the only way." The Queen knelt beside him, her face calm but her mind racing. She was grateful, of course, that her daughter lived, but how could a simple engineer possess such knowledge? Could she trust him? Could anyone trust someone who willingly risked their life in such a dangerous way? "You are brave," the Queen said finally, standing slowly. "And unusual. Very unusual," Kael managed a faint smile. "I only did what needed to be done." Leora, still weak but recovering, reached out and took Kael's hand. "He saved me, Mother," she said softly. "He risked everything. He is not dangerous. He is his kind and smart. He is a hero." The Queen's gaze shifted between her daughter and the young man who had risked his life for her. She studied Kael carefully. There was no malice in his eyes, only sincerity. But she could not ignore the unusual nature of what had happened. Kael's blood, it seemed to carry something extraordinary, something the scientists in her court had never seen. "Kael," she said finally, her voice firm but not unkind. "You will remain here, within the palace. Not as a prisoner, but as someone we must monitor. Your knowledge is too great and your gift unusual. For now you must stay." Kael nodded, understanding. Though he felt the first pangs of disappointment at his confinement, he also understood the Queen's caution. He had saved the princess, yes, but now he must prove that his intentions were true, that his heart was pure. Days passed. Kael remained in the palace, confined to a small chamber adjacent to Leora's suite. He was free to move about certain areas, but guards watched quietly, and the Queen herself visited often, observing his actions. Cale spent his time studying the palace technology, learning the ways of the royal family, and quietly experimenting with the energy within his own blood. The princess recovered quickly, thanks to Cale's sacrifice. She spent hours speaking with him, learning about his inventions and his life before the palace. She admired his humility, his courage, and the brilliance of his mind. Cale had no desire for recognition or reward. He had acted out of kindness and necessity. The Queen, however, remained cautious. She summoned her council and the kingdom's leading scientists to examine Cale's blood and the bioenergy he had shared. Their findings were astonishing. The energy within a human could interact with technology and biological systems in ways previously unknown. Cale's gift was unique and potentially powerful. This human, he is unlike any other, one scientist whispered. If we could understand his methods, we could advance medicine, energy, and science by centuries. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Or he could be dangerous. We cannot allow that. Meanwhile, Cale continued his quiet work, unaware of the growing tension. He spent hours in the laboratory, testing small devices and learning how his blood could interact with them. He was careful not to alarm anyone, focusing only on knowledge and discovery. Leora often visited, bringing small gifts, books, or fresh fruit. She would sit with him, listening to his explanations of how the energy worked, asking questions with curiosity and admiration. Through these conversations, a bond formed, not just of gratitude, but of mutual respect and trust. Cale had saved her life, yes, but he had also shown her the brilliance of the human mind. One evening, as the twin suns set behind the floating towers of Solara, Cale sat by the window, watching the stars. Leora joined him quietly. "You're not just a hero," she said softly. "You are extraordinary, not because of what you did for me, but because of who you are." Cale shook his head, smiling faintly. "I am just a human, princess. Just a human trying to do what is right." She laughed softly. "Just a human? That may be the greatest power in the galaxy." At that moment, Cale realized something important. It was not only his blood, not only his courage that made him special. It was the human heart, the mind, and the willingness to act for others, even at great personal risk. That was the gift he had shared with Leora, and through her with the entire kingdom. But even as he felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, Cale knew that his journey was only beginning. The Queen's watchful eyes and the palace's secrets would not let him rest easily. He had saved the princess with his own blood. Yes, but now he would need all his intelligence, courage, and humility to navigate the challenges that awaited him within the palace walls. And so, Cale remained in the palace, weak in body perhaps, but strong in spirit. His heart was steady, his mind alert, and his purpose clear. He had done the impossible once, and he would do it again if needed. Not for fame, not for wealth, but for the simple, human belief that life was precious, and that courage and kindness could shine brighter than any star in the sky. The stars outside the palace shone on, indifferent and beautiful, as the city of Solara hummed with life. And within the palace a young engineer rested, dreaming not of escape or reward, but of the possibilities of the human heart, and of what one person, one human, could achieve. The morning sun glinted off the floating towers of Solara, painting the city in gold and silver light. The palace, still humming with activity, seemed even more majestic from the observation decks. But inside the grand halls, tension quietly simmered. Cale had been in the palace for several days now. He was no longer sick, yet he remained confined, not with locks or chains, but under the careful watch of the Queen herself. Cale had been allowed to move freely in certain areas. The infirmary, the laboratory, and a small study adjacent to Leora's suite. Still, he could feel the Queen's eyes upon him. Every action, every word seemed to be observed, measured, and judged. The Queen, Seraphine, paced slowly in her private chambers. Her gaze was fixed on a small floating hologram of Cale moving through the palace corridors. She admired him in a way. His courage, his skill, his intelligence, all of it was rare, but she could not ignore the unease growing in her mind. How could a human, a simple engineer, possess knowledge and abilities far beyond her kingdom's greatest scientists? "I cannot let him roam freely," she murmured to herself. What if his blood holds more power than he knows? What if he is a danger, however unwilling? Her advisor, a calm and thoughtful woman named Miral, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, he has shown nothing but kindness and loyalty. The princess speaks highly of him." "Perhaps the human is—" "Different, yes, but not dangerous." Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "Different can be dangerous. I have ruled this kingdom for decades. I know the subtle dangers of those we trust too quickly. Kael must remain under observation." Meanwhile, Kael worked quietly in the laboratory. He had begun examining the residual energy in his own blood, carefully measuring how it interacted with the advanced medical devices of the palace. He had no intention of harming anyone. His curiosity was purely scientific. But he was discovering something remarkable. His blood contained a dormant energy, subtle but powerful. When carefully controlled, it could repair damaged machinery, stabilize unstable energy sources, and even enhance the function of biological systems. Kael had always known humans were capable of extraordinary things, but seeing it demonstrated so clearly made his heart beat faster. Kael paused as Leora entered the laboratory. She was wrapped in a soft, flowing gown, her hair catching the light like spun gold. She carried a small tray of fruits and herbs for Kael, though he hardly needed the nourishment. His body was still weak, but his spirit was strong. "Good morning, Kyle," she said, placing the tray on the counter. "Are you working on something new?" Kael smiled faintly. "Yes, Princess. I'm trying to understand the energy in my blood. It is unusual. I think it could help in medicine and energy systems, maybe even in communication devices." Leora's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "You are extraordinary, Kael. You risked your life to save me, and now you work to help everyone else." Kael shook his head. "I am just human. I do what I must. It is nothing special." Leora laughed softly. "Perhaps being human is the most special thing of all. You think, you care, and you act even when it is dangerous. That is something no machine or technology can replace." Her words warmed Kael's heart. In this palace of glass and steel, where many measured worth in titles and rank, Leora saw him for who he truly was, a human being capable of courage, empathy, and brilliance. But the Queen's suspicion was growing. Seraphine observed Kael from a discreet balcony overlooking the laboratory. She had sent guards to report on his activities, but she did not need them. She could see his focus, his careful attention to detail, the way he worked with purpose yet never sought praise. Still, doubt lingered. Kael's blood was unique. His abilities were extraordinary. What if there were more humans like him, hidden in the universe, waiting to use their powers in ways that could disrupt the delicate balance of the kingdom? Seraphine could not allow risk, no matter how small. That evening, the Queen summoned Kael to the royal chambers. He entered with quiet respect, bowing slightly. Seraphine regarded him carefully, her expression unreadable. "Kael," she began, her voice calm but firm, "you have saved my daughter, and for that, you have my gratitude. But I must ask, why? Why risk your own life for a princess you barely know?" Kael looked her in the eye, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Because it was the right thing to do, Your Majesty. Because life is precious, and I could not stand by while she suffered. That is all." The Queen studied him, searching for hidden motives. She found none. Kael's honesty was clear, yet her concern did not fade. "Your blood, it is unlike anything we have seen. Do you understand its potential?" Kael nodded slowly. "I do, to some extent. It can interact with machines, stabilize systems, even help heal the sick. But it is subtle. I am not dangerous. I only wish to understand it so I can help." Seraphine's eyes softened slightly. She could see the truth in his words, but a ruler's mind cannot rest on appearances alone. "I will allow you limited freedom in the palace," she said finally. "But you will remain under observation. Any misuse of your abilities, and there will be consequences." Kael bowed. "I understand, Your Majesty. I would not do anything to harm this kingdom or your family." The Queen nodded, though her mind was still heavy with suspicion. She had ruled wisely for decades, and she knew that even the most well-intentioned individuals could cause harm if their abilities were not understood. Kael was a puzzle, and she was determined to solve it. Over the next few days, Kael continued his studies in the palace laboratory. He carefully experimented with his energy, discovering that it could enhance medical devices, repair minor machinery, and even improve communication systems. Leora often watched, fascinated by the subtle power contained within one human being. One afternoon, the princess approached Kael with a worried expression. "Do you feel safe here, Kael?" "The Queen." She seems cautious, perhaps even suspicious. Kale smiled faintly. I understand her caution. She must protect her daughter, her kingdom. I do not mind her watchfulness. It is part of living here. Leora's eyes softened. Still, it feels unfair. You risked your life to save me, and yet you are treated with caution. Kale shrugged. Perhaps. But I did not act for reward or freedom. I acted because it was right. That is enough for me. Despite his words, Kale could feel the weight of confinement pressing on him. He missed the open skies of his home, the freedom to explore and experiment without constant scrutiny. Yet he also understood that trust must be earned, and the Queen's caution was not personal. It was her duty. That evening, Kyle sat by the window, gazing at the stars above Solara. He thought of his home, his small workshop, and the countless inventions he had dreamed of creating. Here in the palace, he had the chance to learn from some of the greatest minds in the galaxy, to test his ideas in ways he could never have imagined. Leora joined him quietly, carrying a small lantern that glowed with a soft, warm light. Do you ever regret helping me, Kale? She asked softly. Kale shook his head. Never. Even if I remained weak or confined for the rest of my life, I would not regret it. Life is too precious to waste on fear or hesitation. Leora smiled. You are truly extraordinary. I hope one day the Queen will see that as clearly as I do. Kyle smiled faintly, grateful for her words. They were a small comfort in a world filled with caution and suspicion. The next day, the Queen called for a meeting with her advisors. Kyle is remarkable, she said, pacing slowly. His courage and intelligence are beyond anything I have seen. Yet, I cannot ignore the potential risks. His blood, his energy. We do not understand it fully. How do we ensure he remains loyal? Miral, her advisor, spoke carefully. Perhaps the answer is not control, Your Majesty, but understanding. Allow him to study, to experiment under supervision. If he is truly as honorable as he appears, he will prove it. Seraphine nodded slowly. Very well. He shall remain in the palace with access to the laboratories and my oversight. But I will watch closely. Trust must be earned, not given. Meanwhile, Kale continued his work quietly, unaware of the council's discussion. He had learned an important truth. Even extraordinary abilities are nothing without patience, humility, and respect for those around him. He would prove his intentions not through words but through actions. As the days passed, Kale's bond with Leora grew stronger. She admired his mind, his courage, and his gentle heart. He admired her curiosity, intelligence, and wisdom beyond her years. Together, they explored the possibilities of his human energy, discovering ways it could help the kingdom in medicine, technology, and communication, and all the while, the Queen watched from her chambers. Her suspicion mingled with admiration. Kale was extraordinary, yes, but could he be trusted? That question lingered like a shadow over the palace, waiting for the moment when actions, not words, would reveal the truth. Kale had saved the princess with his own blood. He had shown courage, skill, and humanity. But now within the palace walls, under the Queen's careful observation, he faced a new challenge, to prove that a human with all his flaws and strengths could be trusted with the future of a kingdom. The stars above Solara shone on, bright and eternal, as Kale continued his quiet work. Every calculation, every experiment, every careful test was a step toward understanding, not only his own abilities, but the potential of humans in a galaxy that had yet to see what they could achieve. The palace of Solara was quiet in the early morning, bathed in a soft blue light as the twin suns rose above the horizon. In his small laboratory adjacent to the princess's suite, Kale moved with quiet purpose. The past week had been a mixture of relief, curiosity, and caution. The princess was recovering, her laughter returning, and yet Kale remained under the careful watch of Queen Seraphine. He understood her concern. He had done something extraordinary, yes, but extraordinary deeds often brought both admiration and suspicion. Kyle examined a small crystalline device on the table. It hummed faintly, a tiny glow pulsing in rhythm with the energy he had infused into it. This was one of his first experiments, using the subtle bioenergy in his blood to stabilize the device. The results had been encouraging. Machines that were unstable or inefficient now ran smoothly when connected to the energy. He paused, considering the possibilities. If controlled carefully, this energy could not only enhance machines but also help living systems. He imagined plants growing stronger, medical devices healing patients faster, and even communication systems operating more efficiently. Kale's mind raced with ideas, but he remained cautious. One mistake could attract the Queen's suspicion, or worse, harm someone. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Leora stepped in, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Good morning, Kale. Are you working again?" Kale smiled faintly. "Yes, Princess. I'm testing the energy in my blood. It is unusual, and I want to understand it better." She approached, her gaze scanning the small laboratory filled with devices, screens, and tiny humming machines. "It's incredible," she said softly. "I cannot believe one human could contain so much energy. You are extraordinary." Kyle shook his head, smiling humbly. "I am just human. I only want to help. That is all." Leora placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "You are more than just human, Kale. What you can do, it is remarkable. And you do it not for fame or power, but to help others. That is what makes you special." Kyle felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet pride that had nothing to do with recognition. For the first time in his life, he felt that his efforts mattered beyond his small workshop and isolated inventions. Here his work could change lives, perhaps even a whole kingdom. As Leora left, Kale returned to his experiments. He carefully placed a drop of his blood into a small chamber within the device. The crystal responded immediately, glowing brighter, humming with steady energy. Kale watched in awe. The energy flowed through the device naturally, stabilizing circuits that had been difficult even for the palace's advanced engineers. But it was not only machines that responded. Kale noticed that plants in a nearby terrarium seemed healthier, their leaves a brighter green. Even the small herb used for healing in the infirmary seemed to thrive when near the energy. Kale's heart beat faster. This was more than technology. It was life itself responding to human energy. Kale knew he had to be cautious. Queen Seraphine's suspicion had not lessened. She would watch closely for anything unusual, anything that could be perceived as a threat. Kyle had to demonstrate that his intentions were pure. Later that day, the Queen visited the laboratory. She entered quietly, her expression calm yet scrutinizing. "Kyle," she said, her voice even, "I have observed your work. It is impressive, but I must ask, how much do you understand of this energy? Its potential is unusual." Kyle looked at her calmly. "I understand some of it, Your Majesty. My blood contains a subtle energy that can stabilize systems, enhance healing, and improve efficiency. But it is delicate. I cannot use it recklessly, and I would never use it to harm anyone." The Queen's gaze lingered on him. She could see the truth in his eyes, the honesty, the focus, the quiet determination. And yet her mind could not ignore the possibilities. If his energy were misused, it could be dangerous. But Kale had shown restraint and intelligence. She had to decide whether to trust him further. "You may continue your studies," she said finally, "but I will watch. Do not forget that caution is necessary. Even the most extraordinary gift can become dangerous if misunderstood." Kyle bowed respectfully. "I understand, Your Majesty. I will not disappoint you." Once the Queen left, Kale returned to his work, this time with renewed purpose. He had begun to see a path forward, a way to use his energy to benefit the kingdom while earning the Queen's trust. He carefully tested his energy on more complex systems, stabilizing small robots, enhancing communication devices, and even improving water purification machines. Each success was a quiet victory, a small proof that humans with their courage and intellect could achieve great things. Days turned into weeks. Kale and Leora spent long hours together, exploring the possibilities of human energy. They experimented with small machines, healing devices, and even tiny experiments in the gardens. Leora's curiosity and insight were invaluable. She asked questions that challenged Kale to think in new ways. And together they discovered solutions that neither could have achieved alone. One afternoon, as Kale adjusted a small device in the laboratory, Leora leaned over his shoulder. "Kale, do you ever wonder if humans are different in ways no one understands? That maybe our minds and hearts carry power that others cannot see?" Kale paused, thinking carefully. "I have always believed humans are capable of great things, not because of strength or weapons, but because of our minds, our creativity, and our willingness to act for others. Perhaps that is the power you speak of." Leora smiled, her eyes bright with admiration. "It is more than power. It is hope. You remind me that one person can make a difference." Kyle felt a quiet satisfaction. This was why he had acted to save Leora, not for fame, not for reward, but because one life mattered. And now, through their experiments and discoveries, he could extend that care to many lives. However, the Queen's suspicion remained. Seraphine continued to observe Kale, sometimes sending subtle tests to measure his intentions. She would ask him to demonstrate his energy in harmless ways or solve complex problems under her watchful gaze. Kale approached each test with patience, intelligence, and humility, showing that his mind was as disciplined as his heart. One evening, Kale was called to the Queen's chambers. He entered quietly, bowing respectfully. Seraphine regarded him carefully. "Kyle," she began, "you have shown intelligence, restraint, and courage. But I must know, can you control your energy completely? Can you use it responsibly in the hands of others?" Kale nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. The energy in my blood responds to intention and focus. I cannot use it recklessly, and I would never allow it to harm anyone. My only desire is to help, to understand and to improve the lives of others." The Queen studied him, her expression softening. "Your words are true, but words alone are not enough. Actions will prove your worth." Kale bowed again. "I understand. I will let my actions speak." As he left the Queen's chambers, Kale felt a quiet determination. He had come to the palace a stranger, a humble engineer willing to risk his life. Now he was a student, a researcher, and a guide. His gift, human courage, intellect, and energy, was rare, and he would use it wisely. In the days that followed, Kyle continued his experiments, carefully testing the limits of his blood's energy. He discovered that it could stabilize unstable machines, improve medical devices, and even enhance plant growth in the palace gardens. Leora assisted him, learning the principles of focus, care, and patience. Together, they found solutions to problems that had puzzled even the palace's most skilled engineers. The Queen observed silently, her suspicions slowly mingling with admiration. Kale's actions spoke louder than any words could. He was not ambitious, not reckless, not selfish. He acted with intelligence, compassion, and care. The human heart, she began to realize, could be a powerful force indeed. One evening, as Kale rested in his small chamber, Leora entered quietly. "Kyle," she said softly, "the Queen is beginning to trust you. She watches you differently now. Not with suspicion, but hope, and I trust you completely." Kyle smiled faintly, humbled by her words. "Thank you, Princess. That means more than anything." Leora reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "You have done more than save me. You have shown us all what humans can do. Perhaps one day the Queen will see it too." Kale nodded. "I hope so. But even if she does not, I will continue my work. There is much to learn and many ways to help." The palace lights dimmed as night fell over Solara. Kyle gazed out the window, watching the stars glimmer against the dark sky. His blood had saved a life, yes, but it was his mind, heart, and courage that truly mattered. He understood now that humans were capable of extraordinary things, not because of technology or power, but because of their willingness to act, to care, and to create. And slowly, silently, the Queen began to see the truth. Kale's energy was remarkable, yes, but it was the human behind it, the mind, the heart, and the courage that made him extraordinary. A single human with the right intentions and the strength to act could change the course of a kingdom, perhaps even a galaxy. Kale had saved the princess with his own blood. He had risked his life, shown courage, and revealed a gift that no one had seen before. But now, within the palace walls, he was learning a new lesson, that human ingenuity, patience, and kindness could shine brighter than any power or authority, even under the watchful eyes of a queen. The stars above Solara twinkled quietly, indifferent yet eternal. The palace of Solara gleamed in the first light of dawn, its towers reflecting the pale gold of the rising suns. Inside, the air was calm, but the Queen's thoughts were far from peaceful. Queen Seraphine had observed Kale for weeks now. He was brilliant, humble, and courageous, yet she could not ignore her responsibility as ruler. Extraordinary gifts, even from someone so seemingly pure, could bring unforeseen consequences. Kale, for his part, had become a quiet fixture of the palace. He worked diligently in the laboratory, studied the energy within his blood, and shared discoveries with Princess Leora. His bond with her had grown deep, rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and a shared curiosity about the mysteries of human potential. Kale had never sought favor or recognition, but he felt increasingly aware that the Queen's eyes were always upon him. One morning, Kale was summoned to the Queen's chambers. He entered with a bow, noticing the seriousness on her face. The room was lined with glowing panels, holographic displays, and delicate instruments. The Queen had prepared a series of challenges to test his mind. Heart and judgment, Kale, the Queen began, her voice calm yet commanding. You have proven your courage and intelligence, but I must know whether you can be trusted with knowledge and power beyond your own understanding. Today you will face a series of trials designed to measure not only your skill, but also your character. Kale nodded. I understand, Your Majesty. I will do my best. The first test was intellectual. A complex puzzle of circuits, energy flows, and biofeedback loops awaited him. The device had been intentionally destabilized, with tiny fluctuations that could lead to failure if not corrected carefully. Kale studied the system, his mind working through each connection, each flow of energy. With precise adjustments, he stabilized the device. The panels glowed steadily, and the faint hum of the energy filled the room. The Queen watched silently, impressed by his focus. Well done, she said. Now the second test. This challenge involved empathy and judgment. The Queen presented two small robotic assistants, both programmed to simulate injured creatures. One could be repaired easily, but required an expensive material. The other required Kale's energy, delicate and rare, but would teach him how to manage his gift. He had to choose which to save first. Kyle studied both. He realized the simpler repair could save time and resources, but the second would teach him more about control, patience, and responsibility. He chose the latter. Carefully, he applied his energy, stabilizing the robot systems. It shone brightly, fully functional, while the other robot remained inactive for a few moments longer. You see, Kale said softly, sometimes the right choice is not the easiest or most convenient. Patience and care are as important as speed or strength. The Queen nodded thoughtfully. This was the essence of leadership, thinking beyond immediate results, considering the long-term consequences, and acting with wisdom and compassion. The third test was ethical. A simulated dilemma appeared on a holographic display. Two colonies on distant worlds were facing crises. One needed medical aid, the other technology to prevent environmental collapse. Kyle could only help one at a time. The Queen observed how he approached the problem. Kyle studied the information carefully. Both colonies were important, both had potential to thrive. He paused, then devised a solution. He would stabilize the medical systems first, but use his energy to create a method for the second colony to self-sustain, until he could assist directly. Sometimes, he explained, we cannot solve every problem at once, but we can create solutions that allow hope and growth, even in difficult circumstances. We must act wisely, not only bravely. The Queen's eyes softened slightly. Kale's mind was brilliant, yes, but it was his heart, the careful thought, the compassion that truly impressed her. After the trials, Kale was allowed a brief rest. Princess Leora entered, her eyes bright with curiosity. Kale, how did it feel being tested by the Queen? She asked. Kale smiled faintly. Challenging, yes, but fair. I understand why she must be cautious. And I learned a lot, not just about my energy, but about judgment, patience, and responsibility. Leora sat beside him. You are extraordinary. Not because of your gift, but because of who you are. You think, you care, and you act. That is what makes you remarkable. Kale's heart warmed. Leora's words reminded him that human courage and intelligence were not measured by strength or fame, but by the choices one made, the care one took, and the kindness one showed. The next day, the Queen approached him personally. Kyle, she said, you have passed my tests. Not because you completed them flawlessly, but because you acted with thought, integrity, and care. You have shown that a human's mind and heart can be a power greater than any technology. Kale bowed respectfully. Thank you, Your Majesty. I am honored, and I will continue to prove that your trust is well placed. The Queen's expression softened further. She had spent her life ruling with caution, weighing risks and rewards. Yet in Kale she saw a truth that could not be ignored. Humans, with their courage, ingenuity, and empathy, could achieve remarkable things. One person, acting with wisdom and heart, could change the course of events in ways even the most advanced technology could not. In the days that followed, Kale's responsibilities grew. He was allowed to assist with the palace's medical devices, helping heal those in need. He worked with engineers and scientists, teaching them new ways to stabilize energy systems and improve efficiency. Yet he never sought recognition or reward. His satisfaction came from discovery, from learning, and from the knowledge that he was helping others. Leora continued to be his closest companion, her curiosity matching his own. Together they explored the palace gardens, experimenting with how his energy could enhance plant growth and heal injured animals. They shared quiet conversations about the universe, human potential, and the importance of courage, intelligence, and compassion. One afternoon, Kale and Leora were in the gardens, watching small plants respond to his energy. "Kale," Leora said softly, "you remind me why humans are extraordinary. We may not have advanced technology in every way, but our minds, our hearts, our choices, they can shape the universe." Kale looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. "I only act as humans should. We have the ability to care, to think, and to create. That is our true power." Leora laughed softly. "And you do it so well, Kyle. I hope one day everyone in this kingdom will see what I see." The queen, observing from a distance, felt a quiet relief. Kale had passed her tests, yes, but more importantly, he had demonstrated the qualities that mattered most: intelligence guided by empathy, courage balanced with wisdom, and a heart willing to act for the good of others. Humans were capable of extraordinary things indeed. Yet Seraphine remained cautious. Trust, she knew, was built over time, through consistent action and integrity. Kale had begun to earn that trust, but she would continue to observe him carefully, silently. She needed to ensure that the extraordinary gift he carried, the subtle energy in his blood, was matched by the extraordinary character she had already begun to see. The palace settled into quiet routine. The twin suns setting behind the towers of Solara, Kale rested in his chamber, reflecting on the past days. He had faced tests, solved challenges, and proved his intentions through action. He understood the queen's caution and respected it. Leora entered, her face glowing in the soft evening light. "Kyle," she said gently, "you have shown that humans can be more than we imagined. Courage, intelligence, and kindness, these are powers that shine brighter than any star." Kyle smiled faintly. "I only hope to continue learning, to continue helping, and to show that even small actions can have great impact." Leora's eyes sparkled. "And you do it every day. That is why you are extraordinary, Kale. Not because of your energy, but because of your heart." The stars above Solara shone softly as Kale looked out the window. He had saved the princess with his own blood, faced tests of intelligence, empathy, and judgment, and begun to prove that humans could achieve greatness through thought, action, and care. And in the quiet of the palace, under the watchful eyes of the queen, Kale understood something profound. True power was not in energy alone, but in the courage, wisdom, and heart of the one who wielded it. The queen's tests had been completed, but Kale's journey was far from over. He had begun to show that humans were capable of extraordinary things, even in a galaxy that had yet to understand them fully. The story of courage, intelligence, and heart had only just begun. The palace of Solara glimmered in the morning light, its towers reflecting the gold and silver of the rising suns. The city floated quietly in orbit, serene and majestic. Yet inside the palace, anticipation buzzed through the halls. The queen had called a special assembly of her advisors, scientists, and officials. Today, she would make a decision that could change the future of her kingdom and the life of one extraordinary human. Kyle stood quietly in the laboratory, adjusting a small device that hummed gently with energy. The past weeks had been filled with challenges, discoveries, and careful observation. He had learned the ways of the palace, tested the limits of his energy, and demonstrated courage, intelligence, and compassion in every action. Yet he remained humble, focused only on helping and learning. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Kyle," Princess Leora said, her eyes bright with excitement. "The queen has called everyone to the Great Hall. She wants to speak to you personally." Kyle nodded, taking a deep breath. He had grown accustomed to the queen's watchful gaze, but he knew this was different. This was a formal decision. He followed Leora through the palace corridors, the hum of machinery and soft chatter fading behind them. The great hall was filled with nobles, scientists, and officials. Holographic displays flickered gently along the walls, showing devices stabilized by Kale's energy, plants that had thrived under his care, and healing instruments improved by his knowledge. At the far end of the hall, Queen Seraphine sat in her chair of polished crystal, her expression calm but serious. "Kyle," she said, her voice carrying through the hall, "you have been with us for many weeks. In that time, you have faced challenges, demonstrated skill, and shown patience, intelligence, and courage. You have used your unique abilities to help the kingdom in ways none of us could have imagined." Kyle bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I only wish to help and learn." The Queen's gaze swept across the hall, resting on the scientists and advisors. "We have observed him closely. His blood contains an energy unlike any we have seen. Yet more remarkable than the energy is the human who wields it. Kale has shown wisdom, compassion, and responsibility far beyond his years." Murmurs of admiration spread through the assembly. Kale's quiet dedication and humility had left an impression on everyone. His energy could stabilize machines, enhance medicine, and improve life across the kingdom. But it was his heart and mind that truly inspired them. The Queen's gaze returned to Kyle. "It is time for you to choose your path. You are no longer a captive under observation. You are free to serve the kingdom as you see fit. You may continue your work in the laboratories, advise us on your discoveries, and assist in the growth and healing of our people." Kale felt a wave of relief and gratitude. He bowed again humbly. "I am honored, Your Majesty. I will do my best to help the kingdom, the princess, and all who need aid." Princess Leora stepped forward, her smile radiant. "Kyle, you have done more than save my life. You have shown what humans are capable of. Courage, intelligence, and kindness. Your heart is as remarkable as your mind." Kale's face softened. "I only acted as any human should. We have the ability to think, to care, and to create. That is all I have done." The Queen nodded, a quiet approval in her eyes. "It is precisely that humility and care that make humans so extraordinary. Kale, your actions remind us that strength is not only measured by power, but by thought, courage, and empathy." Over the following weeks, Kale's life changed. He was no longer confined, though he remained closely involved with the palace's work. He collaborated with scientists, engineers, and healers, showing them new ways to stabilize energy, heal the sick, and improve life throughout the kingdom. Machines that had once been temperamental now ran smoothly. Medicinal devices were faster and more precise. Even the palace gardens flourished under his guidance, plants growing stronger and healthier than ever before. Yet Kyle remained humble. He did not seek praise or recognition, though he earned both in abundance. His joy came from learning, experimenting, and helping. He spent hours with Princess Leora, teaching her what he knew about human energy, technology, and innovation. They discussed ideas, solved problems together, and shared quiet moments beneath the stars. One evening, Kyle and Leora stood on the observation deck looking down at the floating city of Solara. The twin suns set behind the towers, casting long shadows and bathing the city in warm light. "Kyle," Leora said softly, "you have changed everything. Not only did you save my life, but you have shown that humans can be extraordinary, not through power, but through intelligence, courage, and care." Kyle looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. "I only did what was right. That is what humans can do. We have the potential to create, to solve, and to care. That is the greatest gift." Leora reached out, touching his arm gently. "And you have used that gift wisely, Kyle. I am proud to know you." Kyle felt a quiet pride, the kind that did not come from recognition or reward, but from knowing that his actions had truly mattered. He had saved the princess with his own blood, faced suspicion, proven his integrity, and demonstrated the potential of human courage and intelligence. The Queen, observing from a distance, felt a sense of relief and admiration. Kale had passed every test, not only by completing challenges but by showing his character in every action. He had proven that a human, guided by wisdom, empathy, and courage, could be trusted with extraordinary gifts and responsibilities. The kingdom began to change as well. Kale's discoveries and inventions spread throughout Solara, improving medicine, technology, and communication. People marveled at what one human could achieve, and a quiet admiration for human ingenuity and courage grew throughout the city. Kale's example inspired others, showing that greatness could be achieved not by status or power, but by thought, care, and action. One afternoon, Kale was called to the Queen's chambers. She regarded him with a calm, steady gaze. "Kale," she said, "you have proven yourself beyond any doubt. Your courage, your intelligence, and your heart are extraordinary. You have shown us the true potential of humans. For that, you have my trust and my gratitude." Kale bowed. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I will continue to serve the kingdom to the best of my ability." The Queen's lips curved in a small smile. "And that is why I am confident in you. Your actions remind us that the greatest power in the universe is not in technology, wealth, or rank, but in the courage, intelligence, and heart of one who acts for the good of others." Kale felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. He had come to the palace as a humble engineer, willing to risk his life for the princess. Now he was recognized not only for his unique gift, but for the human qualities that made him extraordinary: thoughtfulness, empathy, courage, and humility. As the days passed, Kyle continued his work, always seeking to learn, to help, and to improve life in the kingdom. The princess remained his close companion, learning from him, sharing ideas, and exploring new possibilities together. The Queen observed, now with trust and respect, seeing in Kale a model of human potential realized through wisdom and action. One evening, Kale and Leora stood in the palace gardens, watching the stars shimmer above the floating city. "Kyle," she said softly, "you have shown what one human can achieve. Your courage, your mind, and your heart, they shine brighter than any star." Kale looked at her, his expression calm and humble. "We all have the potential, Princess. It is not the gift itself that matters, but how we choose to use it. I only acted with what humans have always had: thought, care, and courage." Leora smiled. "And that is why you are extraordinary, Kale. Not because of your blood or energy, but because of your heart." Kale's eyes turned to the horizon, where the twin suns dipped below the floating towers. He knew his journey was far from over. There were always more problems to solve, more lives to improve, more discoveries to make. But he also knew something profound. Humans were capable of greatness, not because of power, but because of their courage, wisdom, and heart. The palace of Solara rested in quiet splendor, the city floating peacefully above the blue planet. Within it, a young engineer named Kale continued his work, learning, experimenting, and showing the world that one human, guided by intelligence, courage, and kindness, could achieve what few imagined possible. Queen Seraphine watched from her chambers, a sense of calm settling over her. Kale had earned her trust, and in doing so, had shown her the extraordinary potential of humans. Courage, intellect, and heart, the qualities that defined humanity, had illuminated the palace and inspired the kingdom. Kyle had saved the princess with his own blood. He had faced suspicion, passed tests of intelligence and character, and earned recognition and trust. But more importantly, he had shown that humans, in their courage, wisdom, and compassion, could shine brighter than any star in the galaxy.